all of your
From Asmara, I'm travelling to the southwest of Eritrea to see more evidence of early civilizations in the country. High up in the mountains is a place rarely visited by outsiders, the site of Gehato, which is near where the Sphinx in the museum was found. Rock art nearby shows that this area has been inhabited for some 7,000 years. The sheer number of archaeological remains spread over a wide area at Gehato suggests that there was once an important site in this region in ancient times. Very little is known about the society that was based here, but it's believed that there was once an independent settlement that thrived in this part of Eritrea for hundreds of years. This is known as the Temple of Mariam Wairo, and so far it's the most important site to be excavated.
Hello. Okay, what am I supposed to do? Start the screen. Start. Hello, everyone. Hi, this is Sunita Narayan at CSE Delhi, and I'm going to start the presentation. I have my colleagues here with me so that they will also add, and all of you are with us. So as you can also ask questions as we finish the presentation. My colleague Amit Khurana is here virtually with me. My colleague Sonal is here with me physically in the room, and so is Arnab. And we will explain to you the story. It's quite a mind-boggling story we have. And it's something that is really should worry us today. Sorry, Mohan Basu is saying can't hear anything. Is this not working? Mohan, just 1 minute. Can everyone hear? Amit, can you hear? Oh, you are audible.
Yes.
Okay, fine. Then Mohan, can you check at your end? I'm sharing the screen. Not going to share the screen. Oh. Hi. I'm also having to admit people. Can somebody else admit?
Yeah, that.
Okay. So this is our investigation into the business of adulteration of honey. And today is our release and our press conference to release this study, which we have worked on in the last 4 months. And it has been a tough time because COVID makes any such investigation even tougher to do. We were alerted to this story because from beekeepers. We heard from beekeepers that they were in distress. Their business had turned unprofitable. Prices of honey had crashed like never before. And the question that we had was that, why should this be happening? I mean, we know there is COVID. We know everybody is worried about their health. They're beginning to use more and more honey because of the threat of COVID-19, because they are worried about their immunity. And we also know that the government of India has a massive program for beekeepers to build their livelihoods. So then what was happening? Why should this be a problem? Sorry, I just have an issue here. Sorry, I have an issue here. I'm not able to find how to move. No, either this is a problem. This is blocking me. I'm supposed to admit all, but then if I keep admitting...
You can make someone else the host.
We have... Sorry, just give us 1 minute. All our...
themselves influenced by the local. The beast of Ethiopia and the site called Yeha, you'll find remains of this. It's believed about 500 BCE there was a
I guess now, I'll use this, huh? Sorry, people.
Just check with it without the mask.
I love it without the mask.
No, actually, you were speaking.
Okay. We
Speak towards them.
They won't know what I'm doing, so.
Speak towards this.
Okay.
Towards this camera.
I'm sorry, people, whoever is listening, can you just hold off? We are just 2 minutes.
Okay,
Photographers are here, we are just shooting. So, and sorry about this. Can everybody just be patient with us? Nahi aa raha hai? Just 2 minutes, everyone. We're just restarting.
Check 1 2 check 1 2.
Okay now, Sukanya?
Check 1 2.
Yeah, you can see 2. Now we'll open the slideshow. She can see 2. She can't see the slideshow. Isme? Yeah, ye? नहीं ये नहीं It's been a very tough investigation. Okay now, Sukanya? Okay, people, we're ready to go. I've got my mask down, so let's see what happens to me. But let's. I'm going to keep it down for a moment. I'm already too tense. Having the mask will make me stop breathing, I think, at this rate. So I'm just going to go ahead. So as I was saying, we started this story some months ago. We were alerted that beekeepers in North India, their business had collapsed. They were in deep distress. We really couldn't understand what was happening. The sale of honey is booming because of the threat of COVID-19. Household after household, we are using honey because it is an immunity booster. So what was happening? When we traveled, and my colleague Arnab traveled, other colleagues traveled, we heard a very grim story from beekeepers. They said they were getting good rates and then they started to fall. So they were essentially talking about a crash today from 150 rupees a kg down to 60 to 70 rupees per kg. Now, we also heard lots of rumors. They kept saying कि कुछ चीनी है जो चीनी बना रहे हैं, कोई चीनी है, चीनी कंपनी आके एक चीनी बना रही है. So there was all this rumor about Chinese companies making some sort of sugar that could not be detected. But we could not figure this out. I mean, what is this sugar that cannot be detected? And they said that the companies were mixing this sugar syrup with a little bit of honey and they were making huge profits. They also told us that no, now this technology has even moved from China to India, and that now there are factories in Jaspur, and they gave us Jaspur name. They also said Dhampur in Bijnor, Batala in Punjab, and they said that, this is happening, but nobody confirmed. So, it's what you call a Chinese whisper. This is literally what we had. And we also knew that as soon as we started tracking this, all companies would say, but we are producing sugar syrup. This is a legitimate business. This is a business that we produce and we sell to confectionery and others. How could we prove that there was a sugar syrup that was actually being used to adulterate honey and that this sugar syrup could not be detected in tests? So the first part, and this investigation that I will now share with you, which is really an effort of all my colleagues, is going to be in 6 to 7 parts. The first part of it is to understand the business of adulteration. Now, it's very important for us to understand that the business of adulteration is a very evolving business. We also know that honey is the most adulterated food in the world. The definition of honey is important to remember. It's a very clear, simple definition that says honey is what is produced from the nectar of plants, and anything that you do to mix it, to dehydrate it, to do anything with it will not make it honey. So honey is a natural substance. It is a substance that comes from the nectar of plants. As somebody very beautifully told us, the bees get it from the plants and we steal it from the bees. But this is really what honey is. But what we have to understand is how the business of adulteration has actually evolved globally. And this is not just India, but globally. So the first tests that were added, because the first adulteration that was happening from what is called C4 sugar. Now, what is C4 sugar? C4 sugar is sugar that comes from corn and sugarcane. These are plants that use C4 photosynthetic pathway. Now, the first was sugarcane. So, jaise hum chini banate hain, it was sugarcane that was used for adulteration, C4 sugar. But then lab tests could detect this sugar. So then the adulteration business moved to another plant, which is called a C3 plant. So this is a plant that uses C3 photosynthetic pathway. What is this? Rice, beetroot, rice syrup, beetroot, sugar syrup. Then labs came up with such sophisticated tests. They're called isotope tests to detect adulteration. They also came up with a special marker for rice syrup, SMR, and you will hear about this a lot, TMR, which is a trace marker for rice syrup, and something called foreign oligosaccharides, which means that foreign oligosaccharides. Now, this is starch-based sugars. So if it was rice sugar, you would actually find it and detect it if your foreign oligosaccharides were high, or if it was corn sugar. So now the entire game has been to beat the C3, C4 by adding a modified sugar syrup that can bypass and go undetected. And this is not just Indian story, this is a global story. Canada, US, EU, Australia, and New Zealand, they've all in the recent years had such scams, which they're calling Honeygate, which are scams where they have been able to find honey, which is either not from it is labeled, mislabeled, or it has sugar syrup, or it has what they have called modified sugar syrup. We also knew, and this was the first lead we had, and I have to tell you that as a good investigative story, this story brought us leads, it brought us clues, but they also gave us lots of dead ends. We could have given up this story many months ago. We have hit so many walls when we have been doing this story. The first clue we had was the Indian government changing the standards so frequently and issuing directions. We knew something was afoot. Let me take you through this very quickly. It's there in your material, but let me take you through this very quickly. One, the story begins in 2010 when CSE actually released its study, this time on antibiotic residues in honey. In 2014, the FSSAI amended its honey standards to include antibiotic residue limits. Now, these standards had not been amended for the last 20 years. So you have to understand this, that for 20 years, honey standards remain static. First amendment happened in 2014. Then in 2017, FSSAI amended the standard again, and this time it included tests for cane and rice sugar, C3, C4 sugar. So it was very clear that they knew that some adulteration was happening with C3, C4 sugar. In 2018, the standard was notified. But then in 2019, and this is quite shocking, FSSAI reversed its decision and removed all the key parameters, SMR, TMR, foreign oligosaccharides, which would have allowed the detection of rice sugar, from its standard. And I'll come back to it. In 2020, you look at it in the last line over here, they have reissued the standard and now have reinstated those key parameters. So there has been a lot of fiddling around with the honey standards, bringing in standards, tests for rice sugar, for cane sugar, C3, C4, removing it, then reinstating it. But there has also been another move. In December 2019 and then in June 2020, and if you look at the website where we have put the copy there, everything is hyperlinked. So you can actually click on it and go to the original notification. In December 2019 and June 2020, FSSAI informed state food commissioners that sugar syrup is being used for adulteration, and it asks for stepped up inspections. In May 2020, FSSAI says, and this is a very clear notice it puts out, this time to the importers of sugar syrup, saying that it has been informed about adulteration of honey using golden syrup, invert sugar syrup, and rice syrup. You ask importers to register with it and to inform it of the usage of imported products. May 2020. Remember this and remember the three names, because I'm going to come back to this. Golden syrup, invert sugar, and rice syrup. So these are notifications, directions that FSSAI themselves have put out. Ministry of Commerce in February 2020 says that all honey that will be exported as of August 1, 2020 will be screened using NMR technology to detect sugar syrup. EIC, which is the Export Inspection Council, sets up a laboratory for this check. So we knew that something was afoot. So even though we were getting blocked, we knew something was afoot. Because all these things were happening, we also knew that clear directions were going out to say something import of sugar syrup is happening and this is being used to adulterate. Now, this was in spite of the fact that there were standards for C3, C4. So we knew that FSSAI knew that these standards could be bypassed. And we also knew, because NMR had now been made mandatory. NMR is a technology called nuclear magnetic resonance technology. And again, we will come back to this as we will explain it to you, which is an advanced technology which is used to detect sugar syrup, which is modified. So if you look at this, you will see this, and I don't need to get into details, but you will see that the changes have been made, the modifications have been made exactly as I have just explained to you. So as I said, the Ministry of Commerce has mandated additional tests. We then file an application, a right to information application with the Imports Division of FSSAI. We ask for information saying that you have asked the importers to register with you. You have asked them to tell you where is this honey going, what information do you have? FSSAI says that we have passed your application to another division, but does not tell us which. So what we are very clear is that either FSSAI knows what's happening and is not telling us, or it is fishing around to find out that honey fraud and to stop it. We cannot tell you with certainty whether it is complicit or whether it is still clueless. But this is really what gave us the first lead, that the government of India, the FSSAI, was our whistleblower. They were telling us that something is afoot in the honey that we consume and that this is adulterated. So we had this lead. Now this is part 2 of our investigation. We had a lead. The lead said import of sugar syrup, which is called golden syrup, invert sugar, and rice syrup. So Sonal here, my colleague, actually started working on the import-export database of the Ministry of Commerce. This was a complete dead end. We found no name of golden syrup, invert sugar syrup, and rice syrup being used in the database. But, and I will explain this, this is a quick highlight, but we find that Chinese trade portals like Alibaba are advertising fructose syrup that can bypass C3, C4 tests. And when we get hold of a database of the export-import database, we find that the same companies that advertise this fructose syrup on Alibaba and many other trade portals that can beat C3, C4 tests also export to India. So if you look at this Alibaba website and other websites, we've given you many websites here. They're available in all our kit. And as you will see here, they say very clearly C3, C4, C13 pass golden syrup, fructose syrup, good quality from China. They give you the price. Now, I want you to particularly see the third one, which is Woohoo Delhi Food Company Limited. Now, when we were tracking this, this is the same food and HYK food, which we found were exporting to India as well. So we found our first lead on the Alibaba website, which gave us the name fructose syrup is what we should look for. Not golden syrup, not rice syrup, but fructose syrup. So when we started now doing the deep dive, we essentially found that, and if you look at this table below, you will find that fructose syrup, there has been massive spike in fructose syrup export from China into India. In fact, you will see that almost the total line and the Chinese import is identical, both on glucose as well as in fructose. This data is from the Ministry of Commerce Export-Import database. So it's now very clear that we are getting this syrup. It's called fructose, not golden syrup. It's called glucose. It's coming from the same companies, and we have the details in this data here. The major sellers, and again, I want you to please notice the major sellers here. Woohoo, okay, HYK, same ones that we just showed you on the Alibaba selling syrup that can bypass. Same are selling it to India. We also could get a very clear idea which ports they are coming to. And we could very clearly get an idea how much is being exported. Now, you will also notice that in 2019, the amount from China has come down. This gave us the other clue, told us that something else is happening in this business. Okay. 70% of the total, as we said, 11,000 metric ton came in, 70% was from China as industrial raw material. Sorry. Now, this is part 3. We have now established the following, and you have to see this as something we have really been joining the dots. So we knew now that there was a syrup being sold. We knew the name of the company, the Chinese company. We knew now from our export database that this same company is exporting to India. That connections we had made. But we needed now to actually, it still was not convincing enough. So the question was, how do we actually get that syrup? Now, this is where Mr. Arnab comes in. He is our best investigative reporter. He actually did an undercover operation to contact Chinese sellers, posing to be a honey company, and managed to bring to light the shady business. So we sent emails. Sorry, Sukanya, all okay? So we sent emails to Chinese companies soliciting syrups that could pass tests in India. So these are the same Chinese companies that we picked up from the database that export the fructose syrup to India. Replies received that syrups are available and they can be sent. Chinese companies inform us, and this is in writing now, they inform us that even with 50 to 80% of the honey adulterated with their syrup, it will pass all stipulated tests. And after one company sent it, we could not receive the parcel, and we will show you that because it came by FedEx and we didn't have a food importer's license. It's probably lying in the Tuklakabad with FedEx. But the other company, Arnab, essentially wrote back saying that we can't get your sample. And they said, no, we know how to send it. And they sent it to us as paint pigment to bypass the customs. And they sent it to us from Hong Kong because they said to us, and remember, this is Chinese companies. We had no idea. They wrote to him saying, no, there's a lot of fuss between India and China right now because India-China, there's a lot of trade tensions. So we can't get our products in right now, but we will send it via Hong Kong. So if you look at this is the paper trail, and we put it out. All the paper trail is available. When we wrote, what they replied, how we corresponded with them, how they sent us an invoice, how we sent the money for the payment for the sample, how the sample reached. We've given to you the barcode, and these are the bottles. And you will see there the 2 bottles. One is finished because we spiked it. The 2 bottles there are the Chinese bottles on top. Okay, we have pictures of them here. They're also put out for display over there. So we now had the syrup. This was something that was quite exciting because frankly, we didn't even believe such a syrup existed. But we now had the syrup in hand. But remember, I showed you that the last year, the quantity had come down. And when Arnab was actually meeting beekeepers and going out, he was hearing from them that up to Chinese companies have set up shop in India. And they were very dramatic sentences कि China से लोग आए, briefcase लेके आए और उन्होंने तो factory यहाँ लगा दी अब. And Arnab was also told the code word on how to ask for this syrup. And it's a very interesting code word. It's called all pass syrup. Very simple, all pass syrup. And he was given the name that there is a factory in Jaspur. We did not have the name of the factory. We've also not revealed it. We have all the information. We've not put it out. But we got the link to the factory through the import-export database. So now we could connect. We heard the name Jaspur. We got the name. We heard the link. The name was there in the import database. We could make the link. Arnab made phone calls. And as a good journalist, he managed to get somebody to actually listen to him and to say that that he could come. So he traveled then to Jaspur and he made contact with this company. He traveled and he got a sample of this syrup as well, the all-pass syrup. The owner said with confidence, this will pass all tests of honey purity. The clincher in this is the price. It's 60 rupees a kg. We got it at 68.
We quoted 60 and 68.
68. But we were told that if you do it in bulk, you will get it at 60 rupees a kg.
Even less.
And even less. So it's the price which is the real clincher, which is what is destroying the beekeeping business as well. So now remember, and people, we have the bottle there. You will see the big bottle there. That's the Indian syrup. So now we have the syrup. We have 3 bottles. We have the Chinese syrup. We have the Indian syrup. But the question, and this is part 5 of our investigation, the question still was to us, does it work? So how do we know? How should we know? We will know if we can actually spike a raw honey sample, send it to the lab, and the lab will pass the honey. That's how we will know. Now, how do we get a raw honey sample that we can trust? So we went to the beekeepers, we went directly to the source, procured a raw honey sample that can be trusted. We spiked the raw honey. We mixed Chinese and Indian all-pass syrup at 25%, 50%, and 75%. We also did it with branded syrup, which had, and I will come back to it, which had cleared tests. We sent the samples to the laboratory. We sent these samples to the NDDB's laboratory, which is based in Anand, which is a state-of-the-art laboratory for testing of honey. And all the samples which were adulterated up to 50% passed the test of purity. Please understand how the penny has dropped. Samples that we ourselves spiked, our laboratory personnel came in from our lab. They used instrument to spike the samples. We deliberately adulterated the honey samples with sugar syrup, and the honey passed the tests. The 2020 FSSAI standard for honey, all the samples passed. As you will see here, the only sample that failed was the sample which had 75% of the sugar syrup. Now, I mean, remember, failure is also good because this gives us a sense of the authenticity of the tests as well. If everything had passed, it would have been okay, you know, but that means the lab has done its work and that up to a certain level it had passed, but 75% it failed. So we clearly can tell you that up to 50% adulteration with sugar syrup mixed in raw honey will pass all the stipulated FSSAI tests, which are 2020 tests, which are designed for C3, C4 sugar. That's what we know today. Now is part 6 of our lab, of our investigation. Now the question was, so what do we know of the branded honey that we are consuming? And this is a 2-part investigation. The first part was we sent the tests to the NDDB lab for testing, the same brands. We took 13 brands, we bought them in 2 batches. First, we had bought the big brands, then we decided to buy a smaller one just to see if there was a variation. When we sent these samples to the NDDB lab, we asked for tests to be done on the FSSAI 2020 standards. And as you will see in the results that we will show you, all the big branded honey passed the tests. The smaller honey brands, majority of them failed the C3, C4 tests. So in the first round of investigation, what became clear is that the big brands were okay. And that's where the story would end. The big brands are okay. We would have come to you if we had not got these Chinese links, found the syrup, tested it, all that. We would have said, big brands in honey are fine. The small brands are adulterated with C4 sugar, not even C3, C4 sugar. But as we knew about the Chinese syrup, as we knew there was a larger game afoot, as we knew that FSSAI had been putting out all these various signals to us, we knew that this was not the end of the story. So we wanted to get further tests done. Now, we had seen that the government of India had put out that NMR tests, which are nuclear magnetic resonance tests. Think of them like an MRI. I mean, if you do an X-ray of your body, you find something. But if you do an MRI, you find something more. So this is really how the NMR tests are seen world over. They are seen as a sophisticated test which takes a fingerprint of honey and can actually see through and can detect adulteration with sugar syrups, even if they are modified. And we knew the government of India had asked for these to be done for honey that will be exported. So we wanted to get an NMR test done. EIC is the only lab in India which has this test, but it was not available to us. They said, we cannot take your samples because we're not an exporter. So we found a German lab. We found an Indian, they have an Indian office. We sent the samples to their office in India, who in turn sent it to Germany. We have a condition that we are not able to name the German lab, but it's a top food testing lab with an office in India as well. We have the test reports, and of course, in a sealed envelope, we will make it available to anyone who wants, anyone in the regulatory system who wants it to see it. We have made all the detailed test reports available on our website, even as I speak today. So we sent 13 samples of the same batch to Germany for testing using NMR. 2 brands we sent additional samples of, Dabur and Saffola. Why? Because Dabur and Saffola have been advertising that they are using NMR technology and they are certifying that their samples are clean and every batch of their sample is clean and they test using NMR. So we thought we should give them the benefit of the doubt and give 3 batches of Dabur and 3 batches of Saffola, separate batches. So we sent the samples. The first batch was 13 plus 4, which we sent to Germany. Then as the test came in, and we also decided to send another 5 samples of the major brands, another sample of another batch of theirs, just so that we had a reconfirmation. So, and I'll explain this to you as you will see the results, why we did this. The reason we did this, and I'll just show you the test reports and come back to this. We basically found Dabur failed on the, I've jumped a bit. Let me keep my trail of thought. So we selected 13 top and smaller honey brands. As I said, we first sent the samples of 8 top brands to NDDB. All honey tested passed the laboratory tests. I've already told you, except for one, Apis Himalaya, which even failed the test in NDDB for Indian standards. We bought smaller brands, sent it to the same lab. The smaller brands failed the laboratory test for Indian standards. And we found that in most cases, the smaller brands were adulterated with C4 sugar. So again, we got a variation in the NDDB labs. The big brands passed other than APIS. Small brands more or less failed. But their adulteration was with very basic, what you would call first level of adulteration, which is cane sugar. And as I said, we knew there was more to this story. We sent samples to the top laboratory in Germany, and now the picture changed completely. Most of the samples that had passed the test in India failed on the only test that FSSAI left out for rice marker, which is the trace marker for rice. And almost all the samples failed on NMR. And the German lab has told us in writing that this indicates adulteration, addition of sugar syrup. So the story is big brands pass in Indian tests. However, they fail when you send them for advanced tests using NMR technology to Germany. The small brands fail even on the Indian tests because their adulteration is far more basic. And in Germany, most of the brands fail also on what is called TMR, the trace marker for rice, which is the only one test that FSSAI left out of its 2020 standards. And I want to once talk about TMR before I get to talk about our results. So as you will see here, can you all see this? I want you to just look at the line, the third line from the top, TMR. So in the 2011 standards, there was no provision for TMR. In the 2017 draft standard, they said TMR had to be negative. In the 2018 draft standards, they also said it had to be negative, which means you had to test. But in 2020, they left out TMR. So you'll see here, no provision. So it's very clear that they failed on TMR. So what tells us very clearly is that this only confirmed to us that the syrups are so well designed that जो भी standard है जिसको pass करना है उसके लिए designed है. अगर TMR भी pass करना है तो TMR के लिए भी design कर देंगे. So it's designed for bypassing the standard, whatever is the standard. If tomorrow the Indian government stipulates NMR, I can assure you NMR pass syrup will be available. It's not as if they will not be able to do that. So I'm going to come back to this. I'm sorry for everyone who is, I hope I haven't lost all of you. So as I said, almost all samples fail on NMR. Now, what is NMR? Just a very quick recap. It's a gold standard for testing. It's an NMR, as I said, is the difference between an X-ray and an MRI. Think about it like that. It uses imaging to get the full picture of honey. It identifies the origin of honey and its authenticity. It's developed by a German company, but now governments all over the world are using it. However, we are very clear that as soon as this gets mandated, we are sure this will also get bypassed. If you look at if you look at this, now this is where the detail is. Dabur failed. This is the first one we sent to CAF. It passed, as you will see, on all the standards that are there in India. If you look at the first line, we give you on top the FSSAI standard, the limit of the standard. We tell you then the pass that it had and the number that it had in the CAF lab, in NDDB's lab. We then tell you that it failed in TMR and it failed in NMR. We sent another 2 samples of Dabur. Those passed on TMR but failed on NMR. We sent Patanjali. It failed on TMR, failed on NMR. Passed in India. We sent another sample of Patanjali. Remember, I said we had sent 5 more brands only because we wanted to reconfirm. These are big brands. We wanted to send another batch. So we spent the money to send another batch to Germany. And in that, Patanjali failed again. Failed in TMR, failed in NMR. Apis, you will see here, actually failed in foreign oligosaccharides, even in the CAF test. It failed in SMR, even in the NDDV test, in the Indian test. But it failed in NMR and failed in TMR, not surprising. Baidyanath passed in India, failed in Germany on NMR, passed on TMR, 1. Second sample failed on TMR, failed on NMR. Jhandu passed in India, failed in NMR. Jhandu failed in NMR. Nature's Nectar passed in India, failed in NMR, but the second sample we sent passed in NMR in Germany. Hitkari passed in India, failed in NMR. Safola passed in India, but passed in Germany as well, in NMR and TMR. Now, this is important because we sent 3 samples of Safola and 3 samples of Dabur. Safola passed, all 3 of Dabur failed. Okay. Markfed Sona honey passed in India, passed the NMR test in Germany as well. This then is our 3rd brand that passed. Dadev failed. As I told you, the smaller honey brands in India, look at the sucrose, C4 level. This is 20%. So the standard in India is 7%. Okay, you'll see here 20% here. So the first maximum is 77% on top. It's 20%. And obviously it failed the NMR test as well. Indigenous honey passed on all tests in India, but failed on NMR. The second sample we sent of indigenous also failed in NMR. High honey. Now, High honey is a small brand. We selected it because it was seen to be a good brand and we had hoped it would pass. Actually, if you look at it, it has 26.6% C4 sugar. 26.6%. Which means that it had adulterated with sugarcane. Modified करने की जरूरत ही नहीं है. Okay. So the business of adulteration is also very interesting for us. And what these lab tests have told us, and as Amit, Amit Khurana, my colleague, and Sonal, and particularly Amit tells me, the lab tests and the variations in the lab tests have given us a lot of sense of confidence that this is a story. That some have failed, some have passed. Why have they failed? Because, they failed because they're basic adulteration. Society Natural, again, a small brand. This one is unique because it actually failed in the C3, C4 tests in India, largely on C4, but passed in NMR. We think it's because it's on the borderline as far as the C4 is concerned. It was 8%, whereas the standard is 7%, but it's difficult to tell. We are putting all data out for purposes of transparency. So only 3 brands out of 13, Safola, Markfed, Sona, and Nature's Nectar passed all tests. Out of 22 samples, only 5 bottles passed NMR. 77% of the samples failed the NMR test. 3 brands, Dadev, High Honey, Society Natural, failed C4 test. Dadev and High Honey, I've just shown you, have very high levels of what you would call basic adulteration. So what do we conclude? We conclude that much of the honey we consume is adulterated. The business of adulteration is sophisticated and evolved. It uses sugar syrups that are modified. These syrups are imported from China, but are now manufactured in India as well. We can tell you with certainty that up to 50% adulteration is certainly possible. We also can tell you that the economics works in the favor of the adulterant. It's 60 rupees a kg versus 120 rupees, which is the basic cost of an honey producer to manufacture the honey. It's easier to buy syrup in bulk than work with beekeepers and their supply chain. Here you have to make one phone call to Jaspur and you get the kgs of sugar syrup delivered. In another case, you have to make sure that you are in touch with many beekeepers, and then those beekeeper standards have to be checked in terms of other adulterants. So sugar syrup is becoming the easiest. We are also saying that the big branded honeys are consuming have caught up with the modified sugar syrup business because they're passing the test set by FSSAI. And the only way to check this adulteration was to use an advanced test, which is NMR. And we are also saying to you that if the government of India was to mandate NMR, we are sure that there'll be another adulterant in the market. This time it will pass even the NMR test. And that is why we need to understand the impact on our health, and we need to do something much more than just standard setting. Now, the reason why this story is so important, and the reason we are putting out the story in spite of the fact that we know that every media house has time constraints right now, pressure right now. We also know how difficult it has been for us to do this story. I mean, it has taken, COVID is not easy for us to do an investigative report. Amit, who is our colleague, who has actually worked on this, is just recovering from our COVID infection. He would have been with us. He's at home. We've had many people falling ill in between, but we've traveled. It's an impossible time to work, and all of you know this. I don't have to talk about this. Doing anything which is normal is impossible right now. But the reason why this story is so important right now is because it has a COVID link. The reason is very clear, that we are consuming more honey because it builds immunity against COVID-19 infection. Immunity boosting claims have been made by all companies, and it's right. Honey has antimicrobial, it has anti-inflammatory properties. Honey is not sugar. Honey is honey. Bees manufacture honey and bring to us nature's goodness, which is not sugar. It is about enzymes, amino acids, phenolic acids. It is basically got good properties which help to build immunity. So we are consuming more honey, and we should consume more honey because it is a protection against COVID-19, against basically to build immunity. But now instead of honey, we are actually having sugar syrup. And this actually will increase our weight. And now look at the link with COVID. We know very clearly that overweight people are more at risk to COVID-19. It's not just about obese. In fact, CDC right now has put out a report that says it's overweight. It's not obese people. It's overweight people who are more at risk to COVID-19. So actually consuming honey that is sugar will make us more vulnerable. And this really is why we are taking this effort to put out the study now. I mean, this is tough. We know how tough the story has been for us to join the links, join the dots. But we know that we are bringing to you a very substantial research done. Every link has been established. We have worked hard to make sure that we are absolutely confident when we come out to you to say that the honey that we are having today is not honey, it is sugar. And this sugar, instead of giving you benefits, will work against you when it comes to COVID-19. Because obese and overweight people are more at risk. So our health is double, triple jeopardy to our health. So what is it that we want, and what is the way forward? We are saying we need to outwit the business of adulteration. One, we are saying stop import of syrup and honey from China. I think it's important for us to do this. It's the first step to cleaning. But be very clear, as we have shown you, China's story is one part of the story. Chinese technology is already in India and we are manufacturing it in India as well. So we need to tighten enforcement. Now, the one option is for government to include NMR as part of its standards and to ask for this to be as it is done for all honey that is exported. It could say all domestic honey also needs to be NMR certified. But we think this will be short term because there will be syrups that will be made which can bypass even the NMR tests. So we are saying to government, if CSE could do this expose, what is FSSAI doing? Why could it not also have taken samples? It has an EIC lab in Mumbai. It could send the samples there, get them NMR tested, put out the test reports, put pressure on the companies that there will be pressure on it. Why could government not track down the import of sugar syrup when it knows that this imported sugar syrup is being used to adulterate? But we are also asking for one other big change. We are asking that every honey selling company must be required by law to track back, called traceability in the food business, the origins of its honey. We want the honey to be traced back to the beekeeper and to the hive. There is a clear way of doing this. We want the Indian government to make sure now this happens. You can't just have big companies selling us honey under their label and not knowing where the bee is or the hive is and not being able to trace that back. We want that regulation to come in. But we are also saying, and this is a big message to consumers, we as consumers have to start demanding something different. You know, the biggest honey market in the world is the United States. And it determines the color and the shape of the honey. And the Americans like honey that does not look like honey. It looks like syrup. It looks colorless. It looks like anything. It's become the biggest boon for the adulteration business. Now, if I was to ask all of us, and actually we did this in our office even, you know, if honey crystallizes, it's actually honey. But most of us think if honey crystallizes, it is bad. Now, we need to know our own honey. We need to demand that we want natural, we want raw honey, we want honey that can actually be honey which passes our tests of confidence. And the reason we are saying this is that bees are critical. We are environmentalists. You will ask, why is CSE bothered about all this? I mean, we are bothered about it for every reason, but we are also bothered about this because we know beekeepers are going out of business. Farmers are losing their livelihood today. I mean, all the beekeepers that Arnab met told him very clearly, Saab, humne to band kar diya, humne to धंधा बंद कर दिया है. हमने पहले हम लोग इतने डब्बे रखते थे, हम कुछ डब्बे रख लेते हैं घर के इस्तेमाल के लिए. हमने बी बिजनेस छोड़ दिया है. हमें इससे मुनाफा ही नहीं है, हमें पैसा ही नहीं मिलता. 60 रुपये में कौन शहद बना सकता है? So beekeepers are going out of business. And this in spite of the fact that the government of India has a massive program to aid beekeepers. They're going out of business. Now, if beekeepers go out of business, there will be a decline in bees. If there is a decline in bees, you will have a decline in pollinators. Without bees, we lose the productivity of our land. Bees are critical for the food system. We lose life. So this really is our investigation. Thank you very much. I hope I have captured everything, Amit. I wish you were here with me, Amit. Anything you want to add, Amit? Have I missed out on anything before we open it up to questions?
No, this is fine. Thank you.
Thanks, Amit.
अभी बहुत संक्षेप में 2 लाइन हिंदी में अगर आप
मैं बिल्कुल मैं कह दूंगी पहले क्वेश्चंस पूछ लूं सिद्धार्थ फिर मैं यही हूं हिंदी में बिल्कुल संक्षेप में कह देंगे जिसको भी हाँ बिल्कुल no that's why I have questions and we have yes I'll put my mask on I should
stops
yeah.
Should we also open the window and
yeah maybe we can open the windows now हाँ वेंटिलेशन के लिए दरवाजे भी खोल देते हैं, खिड़कियां भी खोल देते हैं. Yes, please. हाँ.
So the three brands, Saffola, Markfed, and Nature's Nectar, which passed all the tests. So can we say that those were actual honey, or is
Yes.
it even possible that there are other caveats? And second question is,
We can say they passed. Can I think it's a very good question. It's bothered us as well. So it's a very, very good question. See, this business is so smart. We don't know. But we can tell you very clearly two things. One, it passed all these tests that we have laid out with you. It passed the TMR test. It passed also the NMR test. We can also tell you that right now, as NMR has not been made mandatory, it would be a little strange if NMR pass would be there. Now, even if it had only been Saffola, I could say Jara, Saffola, Dabur, big brand, Markfed Honey also, smaller brand. नीचे करें आप लोगों को मुश्किल होगी.
Actually, वो
temperature change होगा. So I think we can tell you, and Amit, I'm speaking on your behalf here. Maybe you can add to this. We can say with some confidence, yes. Right now, we can say that 3 brands that we, out of 13, have passed all tests, and they are not adulterated with sugar syrup. Amit, can we say that? Just one minute. Can we say that, Amit?
Yes.
And the follow-ups and the other big brands that failed some of the other tests. Did you find any trace of the all-pass sugar test or something like that?
See, this is where this business is so sophisticated. The all-pass syrup is a syrup. It's there. Okay. Now, as I said, all the big brands, if you look at it, let's name them Dabur, Dhandu, Vaidyanath, they all pass the test, the Indian test. Okay. So technically, they have no sugar syrup in them. Okay, because those tests are designed to detect what is called C3, C4 sugar. You have SMR, which is specific marker for rice. You have foreign oligosaccharides, which is starch-based sugar. You have isotope tests that are done, and you have C4 tests that are done. So technically, they will, in fact, I expect the response we will get from the companies will be, but we pass all the Indian tests, and we know they pass all the Indian tests. What we are saying today, and that's the nature of this story, we are saying, yes, you pass the Indian tests, but that does not make you unadulterated because you failed the test on NMR. And we also have the investigation that we have found the rice syrup, the sugar syrup that can beat the C3, C4 test. So it's 2 parts of the story. We are not saying, and I'm very clear about this, we are not saying that Dabur has mixed the C3, C4 sugar syrup in it. We don't know. We have not gone to a Dabur factory. We don't know. We can't say that. We can say the following. It failed the NMR test. And we also know that there is such a syrup available in the market which can pass all the tests in India but fail on NMR.
And do any of these sugars pass the common sense crystallization test? As you said in the end, as consumers, we must.
So we'll keep the honey and we'll see. We have not tested it.
One more question. You have said that for exporting honey from India, the government made a particular strategy. Is that NMR is necessary for exporting from India?
Yes, yes. As of August 1, government notification. Sonal, will you add to this?
Yes. The notification came out in February 2020, and effective from 1st August, all the exports from India have to be NMR tested. All the honey that is going out from India has to be NMR tested.
Yeah. So how do I? There are lots of questions.
YouTube questions.
So can you moderate them? How do I do this? Sorry, we're doing this virtual and physical for the first time, so forgive us. We will try and so I'll take this. Now I'll take some virtual. Then we can take physical. Then we can take some virtual. Okay. So Shuparno, now I have questions in the chat box. Is that how I take them?
Yes, yes. You can start with.
I'll start with chat. I have Nagesh Hegde. Can we be sure that all the batches of these have passed the test abroad are really good? Exactly your question. That yes, we can say, see, we can say how much we have found. We have found that the batches we have tested, there are certain brands which failed the test abroad. There are certain brands that passed the test abroad. And we are therefore saying that those brands that passed the test abroad are definitely not adulterated with sugar syrup, because the German lab has given us the certificate saying they have passed the NMR test and does not show adulteration with sugar syrup. So that really then tells us that these are better than what we have, the other brands that we have tested. Now, there could be another game they are playing. We don't know. We are putting out to you whatever we have found. Okay, Jayanta, 2 questions. During your presentation, you have shown that certain gold tests have done away with India, which have been used in Germany to catch the violators. Do you think that part of Government of India's relevant regulatory administration may be hand in glove with violators, including the Chinese companies which are supplying the adulterated sugar syrup? And what is the norm of mixing syrup with honey legally? The second answer is very simple. There is no norm. You cannot mix sugar with honey. There is no norm. The definition of honey is that it is nature's goodness. It is brought by the bee and given to you. You cannot mix sugar in it. So, Jayanta, that's easy. As far as the first question is concerned, we don't know. We know the following. FSSAI has amended the standards. Now, the one question we have is, why was the standard amended in 2019, and why were certain parameters which are critical for detection of adulteration dropped? We have no explanation from FSSAI why this was dropped in 2019. But what is good, Jayanta, is that in 2020, these have been reinstated, other than one test, which is for TMR. So SMR was reinstated, foreign oligosaccharides was reinstated. In the 2020 standards, only one was dropped, which is TMR, which is what we have tested in Germany. The Government of India in its test has not asked for NMR to be made mandatory. FSSAI has not asked for it to be made mandatory. Only for honey that is exported out of India, it is made mandatory. Now, Jayanta, there are 2 reasons why we are a little not sure of what is the level of knowledge in the government and what is happening. One, as I said, was the fact that these tests have been revised. 2 is the fact that FSSAI has put out a directive very clearly, 1st in May, to importers, naming these 3 sugar syrups. But this same notification with the 3 names was put out in December to food commissioners, and then again in June this year. And they have said golden syrup, rice syrup, and invert sugar. Now, does FSSAI not know that those 2 sugars don't even exist in the database? There is no name called golden syrup. So why was it asking people to regulate golden syrup? It should have actually asked for fructose, which is what Sonal found. And maybe Sonal can explain this to you. You don't have a mic. Can you explain it? Can you talk from there? Just put your thing on. Sonal is the one who actually checked the database and found it.
I have no echo.
Oh, you will echo. So let me only. They're too sophisticated a technology.
So we started looking at the data for rice syrup, golden syrup, and the invert sugar syrup. And if you know that the export-import data is arranged by HS codes, the harmonized system. And we found that there's no HS code for the rice syrup and the golden syrup. There's an HS code for invert sugar syrup, but there's none for rice syrup and golden syrup. So when we look at the data that we got from the export-import database from the company that we got it from, it mentioned that there was no rice syrup or golden syrup. Even the rice syrup or golden syrup that was coming to India was coming under the head of fructose or glucose. So we did not understand why FSSAI is highlighting these three syrups while it's very difficult to track the two of these, and there was no data on the invert sugar syrup as well.
Okay, there's a very important question that a lot of you have. Let me answer it, which is, have you made these reports available to FSSAI? What is their response? And there is another question. Have you shared these findings with specific brands? No. No to both. And this is really the way CSE works. We do our research. We are absolutely confident in what we have done. We put out the study in the public. And now, of course, there will be a response. This is what we did when it came to the cola investigation. This is what we did when we tested antibiotics in honey. This is what we did when we tested more recently fat, salt, and sugar in fat food. So even when we do the tests or we do such an investigation, our job is to put it out publicly, because tomorrow you could have well argued, "Arey tumne companiyon ke saath share kiya, pata nahi unne kya kaha." So that's not the way we operate. We put it out publicly. Now, obviously, there will be a pushback. Obviously, we will be under attack. Obviously, they will contest everything we say, but we are 100% confident when we stand before you that we have done all the research that we could and that we have joined the dots of this very confounding research. It was not easy at all. So this is really the question that I have. So now can I take some questions in the room? Does anyone have questions? Should I go ahead with the question?
What does actually failing in the NMR test mean?
So can you read out failing in the NMR test, as the German lab says? It means it is adulterated / addition of sugar syrup.
This is the interpretation we got from the German lab, that there is definitely some addition of.
But do they tell us how much proportion is
No. No, because it's an NMR. NMR is a picture. It's not quantified. So this is the difference between the C4 test, which is, Amit can explain this. Amit, can you explain this? So the question from Siddharth is, can you quantify how much was found in the NMR test?
Okay, so across the world, these adulteration tests have this one limitation, that quantification cannot happen. It can only happen in the case of C4 sugar. The other part of our test, which is isotope test, is essentially is based on a purity criteria. I mean, researchers across the world have figured out the level of different sugars, and based on that, they have developed a purity criteria. And that purity criteria, if you see, are now standards, FSSAI standards also. And this is what is followed in other parts of the world also. This purity criteria tells you, okay, which deviates from what, but it does not tell you the quantification of the syrup added. So as of now, across all these standards, quantification is only possible when it comes to C4 sugars. The NMR, and it is also possible in SMR and TMR. In TMR, it tells you what is the value of that in parts per billion by weight. But it does not tell you in NMR. It's as as Sunita mentioned, it's like an MRI. It clicks it basically takes a photo of all the ingredients at the micro level, creates graphs, but the quantification is not possible.
Just a short follow-up. Is there any chance that, from even rice, that's the one TMR that is failing, that there could be any natural entrance of, rice-based
Good question.
sugar or something?
So can there be natural rice-based sugar entrance into the honey, and therefore this is why it has failed? Amit?
I think we do not have standards of TMR in India. But from the lab where we have got it tested in Germany, they have based it on a particular limit of quantification, and that limit is set at 15 pp parts per billion by weight. And they have been very clear that when it crosses that limit, it is known as let's say failed. Now, I would believe that, and because this is what happens when you set the limits in other cases also, in other tests also, the limit basically tells you, it basically covers the something which could have been inadvertently present. For example, in case of C4 sugars, the limit set by Government of India is 7%. That does not mean that basically is a buffer zone for all this inadvertent presence, let's say. So I think
For instance, let me expand on this, Siddharth. For instance, we know that beekeepers sometimes mix sugar and feed the bees. And this is done in off-season and things like that. Now, because of that, the Government of India has kept a limit of 7% of C4 sugar. So this is allowed. But beyond this, frankly, nothing is allowed. I mean, this is honey. Nothing. I mean, you read the definition of honey, it says it has to be a natural product. It cannot be a product in which any addition is allowed.
It's failing the global standard.
So it's failing. No, it's not failing the global standard.
At the lab.
No. It is failing an advanced test. There is no standard for NMR. Please be very clear about it. It is failing an advanced test.
I don't follow. So that's a doubt that I had. Is, for example, when you send the samples to Germany, would it have been possible, or has anybody before sent an actual bottle of pure honey that you know to be pure, see what its constituents are, and as you said, there is a 7% buffer zone. Yeah. So normally you compare the pure to the others and relate it. Yeah. How does the consumer know what is pure honey if you want to buy it from the stores?
So Amit, will you take this, and I can also add to it. We did send samples of pure honey as well. So yes, Amit.
I mean, it's an extension of what I have said earlier. The purity criteria is based on the values which pure honey reference databases across the world have used. I mean, it is based on those reference standards, and that is why we also have been saying that India should also have a reference database so that the biological and chemical properties of all the pure honeys are there, and that can further help fine-tune these standards going forward.
No, but can I just add to your point, Amit? And this is important. The German lab, when it tested, asked us what would be the origin of the sample, and we said India, because they have a reference database of the honey samples in Germany as well. So they knew what a pure honey sample is, and therefore, when they are telling you that this has failed on NMR, they can refer it back to what is a pure honey sample. That's for the lab to have. I mean, even if we had got it tested, we got a pure honey sample tested, we know it passed all the tests, including the NMR test. But the sophistication of it is really to be able to map, it's a picture, as Amit is saying. So they have got a reference database, and they asked us, is it a monofloral honey? Is it a multifloral honey? What is the origin? So we had to send all that. And we had to also say, don't test it on EU standards, test it on non-EU standards, so that you know very clearly, because the EU even says processing of honey may fail. So we said, no, test it on non-EU standard. So with those directions, the German lab has tested. So they do have a reference database. So what is pure honey? Now you and I as consumers, and that's a good question. How do consumers know what is pure honey, Amit? And this is a very defeating question at some level. Amit, Sonal, Arnab, in your investigations, what would you say? How would consumers know?
Actually, there is no way for a consumer to know right now about what they're eating in terms of honey. Because for us, it's not possible to go through all these tests. And all your traditional methods of testing, like, burning a wick with some honey or adding it with water and mixing it, those don't really work anymore. Those are old tests, right? Home tests, right? Which could only work for simple sugar adulterants, right? Maybe some people with sugar syrup, but the advanced adulteration that is happening, that cannot be tested. So it's very difficult. So that's the reason, like Sunita was saying, right? We need something from the farm to the fork, right? From beehive to the table. We need to have traceability, and we need to understand how where your honey is coming from that you're eating. So that's the most important thing, and that has always been the case, if I'm not wrong, Sunita, with all foods.
Yeah, I mean, but this is a sophisticated business. I mean, what we are finding today is this story is not a story about adulteration. It is about the business of adulteration that has become so sophisticated that even laboratory tests stipulated in India will not be able to catch this adulteration. So how does a consumer catch it? And that's really the nub of this story. And therefore, we have to know that business is in, this is big business. There is business here. We have shown you how the business has, we have been able to reach out to the business. So it is very clear to us that this adulteration has to be stopped at its very root. And to stop it at its root, number one, government has to either ban, it has to regulate, it has to enforce, it has to test, it has to hold companies liable, it has to stay ahead of the test. So if government was to do, if it has mandated an NMR test for export, if it had done this kind of an expose, companies would have been very careful that government of India is going to test, let me not mix anything. Okay. Now suppose it comes out in the market that अब तो NMR का भी bypass आ गया. After market, अगर हम जान सकते हैं तो सरकार भी जान सकती है कि market में क्या अफवाह है. तो if they know now there is an NMR bypass test, then they need to find another technology to test. Government has to stay vigilant, has to stay ahead of the game. And we are finding here that not only are they not ahead of the game, they are many steps behind the game. Okay? And we are also saying to consumers, we should now start demanding, what do we mean by pure honey? No? So we'll also need to get educated, and we learn as we get more educated what we can choose. Now, I have one very important question, Sonam. Amit, is NMR part of the Codex Alimentarius for honey from Sachi Sutaria? No. No, because NMR is being asked by many governments now as an additional test. The US Customs Office has just ordered NMR machines. The Australian government has ordered NMR testing to be done, but it is an additional test that governments are doing. I think governments are also very clear that as they come up with that machine, there'll be an NMR bypass. So, you know, they are not, it's not as if it's, the codex is very clear. Nothing other than natural nectar is honey. Anything that is added into it is not honey. Codex does not have any test for it. It just simply has a definition. Am I right, Sonal? Yes. Okay, then I have Sumant Banerjee has asked, is mixing syrup the only source of adulteration? Or also is the syrup manufactured in India, or is it entirely imported from China? Sumant, we've answered that it's China plus now Chinese technology has come into India. And I use the word Chinese technology because we still don't know what is this technology which can modify sugar syrup and can make it bypass tests. We hear a word called resin technology, but we are not able to prove that because we don't have access to that technology yet. Okay. Then NMR is mandatory for exports. Which are the companies that export? Do we know, Amit, which are the companies that export honey? I guess everyone does.
Out of the ones which we have tested, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we know a couple of those. Dadev, we know and we know Nature's Nectar exports. We also know a couple of other companies export.
Agar and others also have an export.
Yes.
Business. So everyone will have. Export is a big business.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. But we don't have the data on that. So we are looking at it from an Indian point of view. We have not looked at exports. I think that's something that is another part of the story. We frankly are not interested in exports. We are interested in Indian consumers. So we are very clear that we were looking, we only took the fact that the Indian government has made it mandatory that there is something that the government knows. That why have they made an NMR testing mandatory for export?
So different batches, I mean, export batches are all a different kind of honey than what we use.
I'm sure they do it more carefully, but we are saying that we know that if they have made NMR testing mandatory, that means the Indian government knows very clearly that somebody has told them that sir, कुछ गड़बड़ हो रही है. अब हमारी samples जब US जाएंगे तो fail हो जाएंगे because the US customs has bought an NMR machine. So clearly they know वो fail हो जाएंगे या जहाँ भी भेजेंगे fail हो जाएंगे तो आप यहाँ भी test कराइए. Now why are they testing जब सब standards हैं and all the brands are passing the C3, C4 test? It means there's something more in this business. Why has FSSAI put out a clear notification saying importers of sugar syrup after they have stipulated the standards? Because they know very clearly there's something more is there. Now, we don't know how much they know of this business. We don't know. We filed an RTI, as I said. We have got very evasive responses. But I'm sure as you contact them today, we will hear from them. What do they have to say to our study? Okay, are there more questions? South is I think I'm over. I don't know. I'm kind of.
One more question if possible.
Yes, of course. Go ahead. I'm still
Is there a
South.
larger socio-economic reason or bigger reason as to why companies would choose to invest or opt for sugar and go through all this technology business than just actually get it?
Economics. 60 rupees. Arnav was offered it. No. And Arnav, please say, China, what was the FOB rate that you were getting it at? Ridiculous.
Anything between 50 rupees to 68 rupees.
That was the source of batch from a pure.
So it's over. No?
Yeah. See, the thing is, honey prices have also crashed. Honey from source, from the beekeepers, right? That has also crashed because of the syrups coming. So in 2015-16, you had about honey prices were as high as rupees 150 per kg. So when a honeybee produces honey, he spends about 100 to 120 rupees per kg to produce 1 kg of honey. Right? But right now, his prices have crashed to anything between 60 to 80 rupees, right? And sometimes even lower than that, 55, right? That's because the honey cannot compete with the syrup, right? So let's say even if you're mixing 50% syrup or 50% honey, right? The manufacturer of that or the brand, right, will not be able to spend that much. Right? We also pay 60 rupees for the honey, right? So it's become a big problem for the farmer.
I mean, frankly, it's a business that I can't understand. The volumes have gone up. Okay, let's be clear about it. Well, it's greed. Let's be very clear. Let's not sort of beat around the bush. It's greed. Volumes have gone up. If you look at the data, Nielsen put out data showing us that 38% increase in honey consumption in the month of March. अब उसके बाद तो और भी बढ़ गया होगा. Dabur, Patanjali, everyone is talking about high profits that they have made over this period. So nobody is doing badly. Okay, consumption is up. If they had to pay the beekeeper, even if they had to pay the beekeeper 120 rupees a kg, they could still make profit on it. But now they're making double profit. I pay the beekeeper because the beekeeper is now desperate. They're not selling. So उनको भी मैंने 60 रुपए दे दिया या 80 रुपए दे दिया. आधा मैंने 60 रुपए पे खरीद लिया. So my honey for a kg has cost me nothing. Okay. I mean, if I basically can do the same honey that I would have to pay 120 rupees a kg, I can do it at 60 rupees. And I sell it at still, what is the base price you found for kg of honey?
It's as low as 105 for 500 grams.
For 500, so 105, so 500 grams, so it's 200 rupees. 200 rupees, which is whose?
Hitkari is the lowest.
Hitkari is the lowest. So everyone's competing with each other. Everyone's undercutting. You know, the problem we have is in this business, just think, if you basically drive out the beekeeper, what happens? I mean, the beekeeping business goes out. Where do the bees go? I mean, we are seeing such massive bee collapse all over the US and EU, and that is, of course, being blamed now on the pesticides that are being used. But look at their worry because of the the massive role that bees play in pollination. So it's a story which is, it really is something which is, you know, it's a story that should shake us all up. It's bad for our health. It's bad for the environment. Okay, people, then can I do the Hindi bites that I have to do here? And if anyone else needs anything, Shuparno is there, I'm here, Sonal is here. Amit is available virtually and Arnab is here, but Amit is available virtually. And we will do our best to give you all replies of all the queries that you have. But I think I've answered everything. Amit, okay? Are you happy?
Yeah, there was this question on foreign brands, Sunita, if you would like to answer.
Foreign brands, sorry, एक question. Amit ने नहीं छोड़ा है. एक minute. हाँ, Amit, बोलो.
There was this question that came up twice about have we tested foreign brands and what about these?
Foreign
Maybe
brands,
you would like.
okay. Can you answer it?
No, basically we did not test it.
We did not test. No, we did not test. We tested only Indian brands. See, if you test one foreign brand, the question will be why not another? The choice of our brands was number one. We tested all the top brands, the brands that are highest selling brands. That was one. Then when we did the second round of study, we looked for niche brands. And there it's an eeny, meeny, miny, mo. We can't tell you that we have been, we have tested everybody. We can't, because there are thousands of small brands. So we have done an eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and some have, and some we picked up, some we didn't. We tried to find brands that were cleaner. We'd heard they were cleaner. That was one of our reasons. We wanted to come up with a slightly better news story. But this is what it is. So thank you, everyone. I hope you have found this useful. You have found this interesting. Thank you so much for joining what is our first virtual press conference. And I hope this story will not die. I hope you will help us to make sure this makes some change, because we are seriously very worried about the implications of this. Really, really worried. This is not a time for us to do such investigative stories which hit very powerful interests, but it is a time to do it because it concerns our health. So thank you very much.